The day was bright, and the city was alive with noise as expensive cars rushed past tall glass buildings. Inside one of the most well-known luxury car dealerships, everything seemed polished and perfect. The glass walls reflected the sunlight, and the shiny cars inside sparkled under the showroom lights. This was a place where people came to show off their wealth, to buy status along with horsepower, and to make others look twice when they drove down the street. The staff working there knew this very well. They had learned to quickly judge who might be a serious buyer and who might only be there to admire the cars. Some customers were treated with warm smiles, while others were brushed aside without much attention. Into this place walked a woman. She was tall, elegant, and dressed in a simple but stylish outfit that spoke of quiet class. Her steps were calm, and her eyes moved across the polished vehicles with genuine interest. She was not flashy, and she carried no obvious signs of wealth, no diamond necklace, no designer bag hanging from her arm. Her presence was strong, but not loud. The way she carried herself made it clear she was no stranger to quality, but the staff did not see it that way. Instead, they exchanged looks with each other, their faces showing judgment before a word was even spoken. One particular dealer noticed her immediately. He was a man who prided himself on knowing his customers within the first few seconds. To him, it was part of the game: spot the big spender, put on the charm, and close the deal. He looked at the woman and smirked. In his mind, she did not look like the type who belonged in this showroom. He saw her skin, her quiet confidence, and her simple clothes, and he jumped to conclusions. Instead of treating her like any other potential buyer, he decided she was wasting time. The woman approached a sleek black car displayed in the center of the room. Its polished surface looked like liquid under the lights. She leaned slightly forward, examining the fine details. When she asked the dealer a question about the car's features, his tone was casual, even dismissive. "That model," he said with a light chuckle, "is one of our top sellers. Very expensive. It's usually purchased by our, let's say, high-end clients." His words carried the suggestion that she did not belong to that category. The woman nodded politely, not showing any reaction to his tone. She asked again, this time about the engine performance. Instead of answering with care, the dealer glanced around the room, clearly distracted, before replying with half-hearted details. Then he turned to greet another man who had just walked in wearing an expensive watch and shoes that screamed wealth. The contrast was obvious. To the man in the watch, the dealer smiled brightly, offering a handshake and compliments. To the woman, he barely offered respect. Still, she continued to explore the cars. She had come with a purpose, and she would not allow anyone's arrogance to chase her away. She walked slowly, examining each model. Every now and then, she asked a question, but the dealer's answers grew shorter, more dismissive. He even laughed lightly under his breath when she lingered near the newest model, a car priced higher than most houses. "That one," he said with a grin, "is a little out of reach for most people. But it's always nice to dream, right?" The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, though spoken with a fake smile. The other staff members noticed what was happening. Some shook their heads quietly, not brave enough to interfere. Others smirked along, thinking it was amusing. They were used to judging customers this way, and they trusted the dealer's instinct. But the woman, with her calm presence, was not rattled. She did not argue, she did not raise her voice. Instead, she moved with dignity, her eyes steady and thoughtful. To her, this was not new. She had faced such treatment many times in places where people measured worth by appearances. She had learned to rise above it, knowing that her true value was never something anyone in a showroom could define. Minutes passed, and the dealer grew bolder in his condescension. When she asked if the car could be customized, he chuckled again. "Well, customization adds a lot to the cost. I mean, people usually spend hundreds of thousands on top of the base price. It's not really something most customers can manage comfortably. His words were sharp, but his tone was coated in politeness, as though he were doing her a favor by reminding her of her supposed limits. He turned away quickly afterward, walking toward another couple who had just entered. His eagerness to impress them was clear. He left the woman standing there, as though her time and her questions were not worth his effort. The woman straightened her back, her calm demeanor unshaken. She walked slowly to another car, this one silver, sleek, and futuristic in its design. She ran her fingers lightly along the side mirror, studying the details carefully. The reflections of the showroom lights danced on her skin, and for a moment, she looked like she belonged more than anyone else in the room. A quiet confidence radiated from her, though no one around her seemed to notice it. To them, she was just another window shopper, someone whose curiosity would end at the price tag. Her thoughts, however, were not so simple. She remembered moments from the past when people had judged her the same way: clerks who followed her around stores, strangers who doubted her ability to afford what she wanted, business partners who underestimated her until they saw her achievements. Each time, she had chosen the same path: dignity, patience, and silence. For her, every such moment was a reminder of how much further she had come than anyone could imagine. The dealer returned briefly, noticing she was still there. He raised an eyebrow, a look of disbelief crossing his face. He spoke again, his words chosen to make her feel small. "You know," he said with a smile that wasn't really a smile, "maybe you should check out some of the models we keep outside. They're a little more, let's say, practical. Easier to manage." He gestured vaguely toward the back, where older models were parked. Then he excused himself once more, hurrying back to the customers he thought were more important. The woman took a quiet breath, her hands clasped gently in front of her. She looked at the car one last time, her eyes reflecting calm strength. If the dealer thought he could make her feel out of place, he was wrong. She had built her life on proving people wrong without ever needing to raise her voice. As she turned to leave the dealership floor, there was no anger in her step, only a quiet grace. She knew something no one else in that room knew, something that would soon shift the entire atmosphere. But for now, she walked with patience, carrying herself with the dignity that came from years of knowing her own worth. The staff, still busy with their chosen customers, barely noticed her leaving the main display area. To them, she was just another person who came to admire cars beyond her reach. But soon, their assumptions would turn into shock. The moment of revelation had not yet arrived, but the stage was being set. Every dismissive smile, every laugh, every careless word spoken by the dealer was only making the silence before the storm louder. The woman's calm exit was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something far greater. The woman did not leave the dealership right away. Something inside her told her to stay just a little longer, as though fate had arranged for this moment to play out. She slowly moved to the far side of the showroom where another line of luxury cars stood. The polished floor reflected the shine of each vehicle, and every car looked like a piece of art, meant to be admired. She paused by a silver model with long curves and a glowing emblem at the front. She asked softly about the features, but again the same dealer, who had been watching her with faint amusement, walked over. This time, his tone was even more patronizing. "This car is very popular among serious buyers," he said, his voice carrying the weight of assumption. "But the starting price is already high, and with custom options, the cost goes through the roof. It's not really practical unless you're one of our top clients." His eyes studied her as if she were a puzzle he had already solved. Then he added with a chuckle, "I can show you something else that's a little more realistic for your budget." He didn't ask about her budget. He assumed it. The woman gave a small nod, her calm face unchanged. She didn't argue, nor did she react with anger. Her poise was unshaken, though inside she felt the weight of the moment. She had been in places like this before: restaurants where waiters ignored her, boutiques where clerks followed her around as if she might steal, offices where people doubted her ability before hearing her speak. Every time, she remembered the same lesson her life had taught her: people often judge what they do not understand. It was not her job to convince them of her worth. Her job was only to keep walking forward, carrying herself with quiet strength. The dealer, however, seemed to enjoy his own game. He spoke with exaggerated patience, as if explaining something to someone who couldn't possibly grasp the world of luxury cars. "See this button here," he said, leaning inside the car and pointing at the console. "This is where the real value is: high-end tech, advanced features. But let me be honest, most people find it hard to keep up with the maintenance cost alone. It's not just buying the car. It's keeping it." His laugh was light, but his eyes were sharp, testing whether his words would sting. Other staff members passed by, some catching pieces of the exchange. They didn't step in. They had grown used to these kinds of interactions. Some of them had already labeled her in their minds, not a serious customer. A few younger employees, though, shifted uneasily. They saw the quiet dignity in the woman's face, and they wondered if their colleague was making a mistake. But they stayed silent, not willing to challenge him openly. The woman asked another question, this time about the warranty. The dealer's response was clipped, as though he wanted to end the conversation quickly. He glanced at his watch and then back toward another group of customers browsing near the entrance. "The warranty is generous, yes," he said with a thin smile, "but honestly, you'd never need to worry about that unless you were actually planning to buy." And from the look of things, he trailed off, letting the unfinished sentence hang in the air. The message was clear: he doubted she was serious. She took a quiet breath, steadying herself. Her eyes moved over the cars, appreciating the beauty of the designs. In truth, she loved cars. She had grown up fascinated by engines, by the way machines came alive when designed with care. She wasn't just someone wandering in to pass the time. She was here because she respected craftsmanship. And she could afford every single car in the room, though no one there seemed to realize it. That was the irony she had seen many times before: people who measured wealth with their eyes often missed the people who carried true wealth in silence. As she continued to explore, the dealer followed loosely, almost as if to keep an eye on her. He made occasional remarks, never openly rude, but always laced with a tone of superiority. "Most of our buyers finance over several years," he said at one point, "though of course, we have special packages for people who qualify. But those are rare cases." Another time, when she paused at a convertible, he said, "That model is more of a showpiece. It's usually bought by celebrities or executives who don't need to think twice about money." Each word carried an invisible line drawn between her and the customers he considered worthy. Through it all, the woman remained composed. She nodded politely, her expression steady. She asked a few more questions, always calm, never once letting him see how deeply his assumptions echoed the prejudices she had faced so many times before. She wasn't here to prove him wrong. She didn't need to. Life had already proven her right countless times. Still, there was something about this moment that lingered, as if the air itself was waiting for a shift. Across the showroom, a few other customers noticed what was happening. A man and his wife whispered to each other as they saw the dealer laugh lightly after one of her questions. Another young couple watched curiously, sensing the imbalance in the interaction. Even though no harsh words were spoken, the condescending tone was visible enough to anyone paying attention. The woman herself did not make a scene. She stood tall, her shoulders relaxed, her voice soft but clear. In her calmness, she seemed to carry more authority than anyone else in the room. The dealer, on the other hand, began to grow careless. His confidence swelled each time she stayed quiet. He mistook her silence for weakness, never realizing that it was her strength. Finally, as she leaned slightly toward the newest model on display, the one with a price tag higher than some entire houses, he let out a low laugh. "Now this one," he said with a grin, "is a dream for most people. Out of reach, but always nice to imagine, right?" He smiled as though sharing a joke with her, expecting her to laugh along, to accept the little box he had placed her in. But she did not laugh. She simply studied the car for a few moments longer, her face calm and unreadable. Her silence made him shift uncomfortably, though he quickly covered it up with another false smile. He didn't know it, but the balance of power was already beginning to shift, even if no one else could see it yet. The woman slowly straightened, her eyes sweeping once more across the polished showroom. She could feel the weight of the dealer's assumptions pressing down like a shadow. Yet, she stood tall, unbothered, her thoughts steady. She knew what was coming. She knew her patience would outlast his arrogance. For now, she let him believe in his judgments, because soon the truth would arrive, and the laughter he carried so easily would disappear from his lips. The other staff kept glancing her way, some with curiosity, others with dismissal. The dealership floor buzzed with voices, but around her, it felt as though everything was holding its breath. The quiet before the moment of change. The stage was being set, piece by piece, with every careless laugh, every dismissive remark, every wrong assumption. The woman had not raised her voice, not once. Yet, without knowing it, the dealer had already written the lesson he was about to learn. The dealership doors opened with a soft hiss as a tall young man stepped inside. His stride was smooth, his expression calm but confident, and his very presence seemed to change the air in the room. He wore a dark tailored suit, the kind that was subtle in style but spoke loudly in cost. His shoes shined, and his tie was perfectly set. He carried himself like someone who was used to being noticed, yet didn't seek attention. The staff near the entrance straightened almost instinctively. They had seen wealthy customers before, but something about this man felt different. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the aura of quiet authority he brought with him, the way he owned the room without saying a word. The woman near the silver car turned her head and her lips softened into a smile. Her son had arrived. For a brief moment, the dignity she carried on her own was joined by the warmth of family pride. He walked directly toward her, ignoring the stares that followed him. The sound of his polished shoes against the showroom floor echoed like steady beats of a drum, and every step made the staff pay closer attention. The dealer, who had been mocking her questions only moments earlier, froze when he saw where the man was headed. At first, he thought perhaps the young billionaire-looking figure was here for another customer. But then he watched as the man's face lit up with affection upon seeing the woman. The dealer's stomach tightened. He had no idea who this man was, but he could tell immediately that he was not just another customer. "Mother," the young man said softly as he reached her, his voice carrying a gentle warmth that filled the room. He leaned forward slightly and kissed her cheek, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder in a gesture that showed both respect and love. Around them, the staff who had been whispering earlier fell silent. The sound of their small laughter and private comments died away as the truth began to unfold before their eyes. The woman smiled at her son, her eyes calm as always. She had not once lost her dignity during the dealer's arrogance, and now, with her son standing beside her, she didn't need to say anything at all. Her presence alone was enough to show the contrast between her quiet grace and the dealer's shallow judgment. The young man glanced briefly at the car she had been looking at, then at the dealer, who stood pale and stiff, suddenly unsure of what to do. The dealer's earlier confidence drained from his face. His smirk was gone. His hands twitched slightly as he adjusted his tie, realizing too late how badly he had miscalculated. Other employees began to whisper. Some recognized the young man. His face had been in business magazines, on television, and in articles about entrepreneurs who had changed industries before they even turned 30. He was a name associated with success, investment, and global influence. a billionaire whose reach extended into real estate, technology, and even automotive partnerships. Some of the cars in the dealership carried parts from companies his group controlled. The irony cut deeper than anyone there could imagine. The dealer swallowed hard, his throat dry. Just moments before, he had told the woman that the cars were out of reach. Now, standing before him, was the man who could probably buy the entire dealership without blinking. His face turned pale, and sweat began to gather at the back of his neck. The son's eyes locked on the dealer, calm but steady. He did not raise his voice, but the weight of his gaze was enough to make the man fidget. "Were you helping my mother?" he asked in a tone that was not angry, but serious enough to make the dealer's heart race. The dealer opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. He tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "Ah, yes, of course, sir. I was just explaining some of the features." She was very interested. His voice cracked slightly, and the other staff could hear the desperation in his tone. The young man looked at his mother for confirmation. She gave only the faintest nod, her eyes saying more than any words could. She had been patient, allowing the dealer to reveal his character fully. Now, with her son beside her, she didn't need to explain what had happened. It was already clear. The staff and the few customers nearby sensed the tension building. The young billionaire's presence was not loud, but it was commanding. Every detail, the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he addressed his mother with respect, told them who held true power in the room. The dealer tried to recover, forcing out words quickly. "We always value our customers here," he said with a shaky laugh. "We do our best to provide excellent service. I hope everything has been satisfactory so far." The young man raised an eyebrow slightly, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to his mother. "Do you like this model?" he asked, gesturing to the sleek black car she had been admiring earlier. His voice was calm, as though nothing else mattered except her opinion. She gave a gentle smile. "It's a beautiful design," she said softly. "But I wasn't sure if it was practical." The dealer's face grew red. He realized, too late, that his earlier comments about dreaming and things being out of reach had been heard not only by the woman but now by the son who could buy the car in cash 10 times over. The young man turned back to the dealer, his expression still composed. "My mother is always practical," he said firmly. "That's why she deserves to be treated with respect. I trust that was the case here." His words were polite, but they carried an edge that made the dealer shrink. The silence in the room grew heavier. Employees exchanged looks, some filled with guilt for not speaking up earlier, others with awe at how quickly the tables had turned. Customers watched in stunned quiet, realizing they were witnessing something more powerful than any car sale, a moment where truth exposed arrogance. The dealer stammered, "Why yes, of course, sir. Always. We pride ourselves on respect. It must have been a misunderstanding if anything seemed otherwise." His words tumbled out too quickly, and even he could hear how hollow they sounded. The young man gave a small nod, his eyes not leaving the dealer's. He did not argue or accuse directly. He didn't need to. His presence, his calm voice, and the pale face of the dealer told the story clearly enough. Then he turned once more to his mother, gently offering his arm. She accepted, her hand resting lightly against him as though the world around them had faded away. Together, they stood in the middle of the gleaming showroom, a quiet picture of strength and dignity. The mother who had been dismissed and the son who carried power that the dealer couldn't even dream of. Without saying much, they had already changed the atmosphere of the entire room. The laughter that had once followed her questions was gone. The arrogance that had colored every word from the dealer had disappeared. In its place was silence, heavy with realization. The dealer shifted uncomfortably, his pale face betraying the panic in his chest. He knew the truth now, and it was too late to undo the damage. Every wrong assumption he had made had come back to him like a mirror, showing him exactly who he was compared to who she truly was. The woman remained calm, her eyes soft, her dignity intact. She had not needed to argue or defend herself. Life had done it for her, in the most unexpected yet powerful way through her son's presence. The moment was not about revenge. It was about truth. And the truth was now visible to everyone in the room. The young man stood calmly beside his mother, his presence commanding the entire showroom without raising his voice. His eyes, sharp yet collected, never left the dealer, who now looked as if the ground beneath him was slipping away. The earlier arrogance that had painted the dealer's face was completely gone, replaced with nervous smiles and a pale expression. His confident smirk had vanished as quickly as the shine on a car left out in the rain. Now, every word he tried to form seemed to get caught in his throat. The mother remained graceful, her expression calm as always. She did not gloat, did not smirk, did not remind the man of his behavior. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. The dealer knew exactly what he had done, and the weight of his own judgment pressed against him like a heavy chain. Around them, the other employees and even customers felt the shift in power. The laughter that had followed her earlier questions was gone. Now the room was thick with silence, everyone watching, waiting to see what the young man would do. "Tell me," the young man finally said, his voice steady, "did you answer all of my mother's questions properly?" His tone wasn't aggressive, but it carried the authority of someone used to getting direct answers. His words cut through the air, making the dealer swallow hard. "Yes, sir," the dealer replied quickly, his hands clasping in front of him. "Of course, I did my best to explain. If anything seemed unclear, it was only a misunderstanding." The young man's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not need to raise his voice, the weight of his calm tone was enough. "Misunderstanding," he repeated, as if testing the word. His gaze shifted briefly toward his mother, then back to the dealer. "Respect should never be misunderstood. It should always be clear." The dealer stammered, "Why yes, absolutely, sir. I completely agree." He tried to force a smile, but it looked weak and unconvincing. The other staff members standing nearby exchanged uneasy glances, knowing their colleagues' earlier laughter had not been a misunderstanding at all. It had been deliberate, a choice made from assumption and prejudice. The young man took a slow step forward, his polished shoes echoing against the floor. He placed a hand gently on the hood of the sleek black car his mother had admired earlier. "This one," he said softly, more to her than to anyone else. "You like it?" She nodded with a serene smile. "Yes, it's beautiful. But as I said before, it may not be practical." Her son's lips curved into a faint smile. "For you, practicality is never about money," he replied. "It's about principle. And that is why you have always been my example." His words carried a warmth that spread across the silent showroom, reminding everyone that the woman who had been dismissed only moments ago was not just a customer, she was someone deeply respected by the man they now realized was far beyond their imagination in influence. The dealer's knees almost buckled under the weight of the truth. He realized fully now who he was speaking to. The young man standing before him wasn't just wealthy, he was the billionaire whose name had appeared in business articles, whose ventures touched industries worldwide. And this woman, whom he had dismissed so easily, was his mother, the very person who had raised him into the man now standing in front of them all. Sweat dotted the dealer's forehead, and he tried again to recover, his voice shaking. "Sir, I hope you know we always value every customer equally. If there was any moment where I failed to show that, I apologize deeply. It won't happen again." The young man tilted his head slightly, his eyes sharp but calm. "You speak of value," he said, "yet it is not cars that define it. People define it. Every person who steps into this place should be treated with dignity, whether they are here to buy or simply to look. That is the responsibility of your position. Do you agree? Yes, the dealer said quickly, nodding so fast it seemed as if he was afraid not to. His voice cracked with desperation. Yes, absolutely. You are right. The customers watching shifted uncomfortably, some whispering under their breath. They had all seen the way the dealer had treated her, and now the lesson was being spoken out loud. The truth could not be hidden behind apologies. The young man turned back to his mother, his expression softening instantly. You don't need to stay here any longer, he said quietly. I've seen enough. She gave him a gentle look, one filled with pride but also calm restraint. I am fine, she said softly. I've faced worse. Her words were true, but they carried no bitterness. They carried wisdom, the wisdom of someone who had lived through many such moments and risen above them every time. The dealer stepped forward slightly, desperation making his movements clumsy. Please, sir, ma'am, allow me to make it up to you. We can offer special service, exclusive packages, whatever you'd like. His words tumbled out, frantic attempts to patch the hole he had dug for himself. The young man's gaze returned to him, cool and sharp. Respect cannot be sold as a package, he said firmly. It must be given freely, every single time. You cannot take back what has already been shown. The dealer's face turned even paler. His body stiffened, and his eyes darted nervously to the other staff members as if begging for help. But none of them moved. They knew the truth was standing in front of them, undeniable. The young man gently guided his mother toward the exit, his hand resting lightly at her back. Every eye in the showroom followed them. The silence was so heavy that even the soft sound of their footsteps felt louder than before. The dealer watched them go, his mouth dry, his body frozen in place. He wanted to speak, to say something that would change what had just happened, but there were no words left that could erase the shame he felt. Before they reached the door, the young man paused and turned back, his eyes sweeping across the staff, his voice calm but carrying a weight that filled the entire room. Let this be a reminder, he said. True wealth is not in the car you sell or the suit you wear. It is in how you treat people when you think no one is watching. The words hung in the air like a final judgment. The customers looked at the dealer, their expressions a mix of pity and disapproval. Some shook their heads, already making silent decisions about whether they would trust the dealership again. The staff stood stiff, their faces pale, knowing they had witnessed a moment that would not be forgotten. The mother and son stepped outside into the bright daylight. The woman lifted her head slightly, her eyes calm. Her son opened the door of a sleek car parked just outside and helped her in, his actions filled with respect. As they drove away, the dealership behind them remained trapped in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down harder than any luxury car ever could. Inside, the dealer finally sank into a chair, his hands trembling. His pale face told the whole story. He had laughed at someone without knowing who she was, without offering the dignity every human deserved. And now the truth of her identity and her son's power had left him stripped of his pride. The lesson would remain with him, carved into memory, long after the shiny cars in the showroom lost their sparkle. The ride away from the dealership was quiet at first. The woman sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She gazed out of the window, watching the city pass by as her son drove. The engine purred softly, a sound of power and grace, yet her mind was not on the car. It was on the events that had just unfolded. She thought of the laughter she had heard, the way the dealer had spoken down to her, and then the way everything had changed the moment her son entered the room. She didn't need to speak, because her son already understood everything without her saying a word. He glanced at her briefly before turning his eyes back to the road. Mother, he said gently, you should never have to endure moments like that. You deserve more than anyone's careless judgment. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. She gave a small, knowing smile. My son, life has taught me many lessons. One of them is that people often reveal their hearts by how they treat those they underestimate. Today was not the first time I faced such behavior, and it may not be the last. But I have learned to walk through it with dignity. Her words carried weight, the kind of wisdom only years of patience could build. She had lived through challenges far greater than a dismissive car dealer. Yet her son's expression hardened. He had built empires, earned respect in boardrooms around the world, and made decisions that shaped industries. But none of it mattered more to him than the respect owed to the woman who had raised him. "You've always carried yourself with grace," he said firmly, "but sometimes, silence isn't enough. People must be reminded that respect is not optional. Today, I hope that man learned a lesson he will never forget." She reached over and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You gave him that lesson without anger," she said softly. "That is the greater victory. Power does not need to shout to be heard. It only needs to stand with truth." As the car moved smoothly through the streets, memories stirred in her mind, memories of raising her son with limited means, of teaching him to never let anyone's opinion define his worth, of reminding him to always treat others with kindness no matter who they were. Now, seeing him as a man who commanded the respect of the world, she felt both pride and peace. Back at the dealership, the silence had not lifted. The dealer sat at his desk, pale and shaken. His colleagues avoided his eyes, though their expressions revealed a mixture of discomfort and shame. They knew they had laughed too. They knew they had chosen silence when they could have chosen respect. The weight of the billionaire's words still echoed in the air, reminding them all that every action, no matter how small, left a mark. The customers whispered among themselves. Some spoke of canceling their appointments with the dealership, not wanting to support a place that allowed arrogance to replace service. Others quietly admired the woman's dignity, contrasting it with the dealer's shallow judgment. News of such moments always traveled fast, and it would not be long before the story found its way outside those glass walls. The dealer finally leaned back, covering his face with his hands. His earlier laughter replayed in his mind, but now it sounded cruel even to him. He realized that he had not only insulted a woman who could buy the car he sold, he had insulted the very idea of fairness and respect. His pale face told the truth. The cost of his arrogance was far greater than any commission he could ever earn. Meanwhile, the woman and her son reached their home. It was not a palace but a residence filled with warmth, art, and a quiet kind of luxury that spoke of taste rather than vanity. She stepped out of the car with her son's help, smiling at him with the same gentleness she had shown since he was a boy. "You are too protective," she teased lightly. "And you are too forgiving," he answered with a smile, though his tone carried sincerity. "But maybe that is why I am who I am. Because you taught me patience and strength at the same time." They walked inside together, and the air of the dealership seemed far away. Yet the lesson lingered, not just for them but for everyone who had witnessed it. The woman had shown that true dignity did not need to fight for recognition. It carried its own power. The young man had shown that respect was not something to be begged for but demanded by presence alone. Days later, the story did reach beyond the walls of the dealership. People who had been there told their friends, and whispers spread into business circles. It became a quiet tale told in boardrooms and among other dealerships: never underestimate the person standing in front of you. Respect everyone, because you never know who they are or who they might be connected to. For the dealer, the lesson was carved deeply into his conscience. Each morning when he returned to the showroom, the memory of that day returned with him. No longer did he laugh at anyone who walked in. No longer did he measure people by the brands they wore or the jewelry they displayed. He greeted each person with care, but not out of fear of wealth. It was out of the realization that dignity must be given freely, not reserved for those who looked the part. For the staff, the story was retold as a warning. They whispered to new hires about the day the billionaire's mother walked in and was dismissed, and how everything changed when the truth was revealed. The tale became part of the dealership's culture, a reminder carved into their history. As for the woman, she did not dwell on the incident. She carried on with her life, calm and graceful as ever. She visited community centers, spoke with young people about resilience, and reminded her son often that true wealth was not measured in dollars but in character. She never mentioned the dealer again, because to her, the lesson had already been given, and she saw no need to hold on to bitterness. Her son, however, remembered it well. Each time he walked into a boardroom, each time he signed a deal, he carried the memory of that day as a reminder of why he worked so hard, not just for wealth, but to build a world where his mother's dignity could never again be questioned. And so the story ended not with shouting or revenge, but with a quiet triumph. A woman had walked into a place where she was dismissed and walked out with her dignity untouched. A son had stood beside her, showing that true power was not in wealth alone, but in defending what mattered most, respect. The dealer who once laughed now lived with the memory of his own pale face, knowing he had been taught a lesson that would follow him for the rest of his days.